I just want to give you all a little bit of a preview and a taste of what's coming up at our next plenary, because I think this paradigm is hopefully really helpful, and I'll just name that I think often is where some teams get stuck or some individuals get stuck. So I want to invite you, Scott's already way ahead of the game. Turn to page, what page are we? It's like the page 4. There you go, without a page number. The one that has learning about being with on the top of it. And what I want to do is just briefly go through this, and then we're actually going to do a little exercise. Again, this will happen within your teams. So this is meant to give you a taste, not a full experience of what this is. But the hope is as you sit with your teams, if they face any kind of confusion, essentially you'll have a little bit of a know-how, and the coaches will be there also helping through this process. Here's 4 ways that, and maybe this isn't all encompassing, but 4 ways that I think often describe how we as congregations engage with our community. And in the shorthand, it has being with, which is when we focus not on solving the problem, but enjoying people for their own sake. Being for, so when we focus on having the right ideas or attitudes. I think advocacy is often a good word that can be described as a being for kind of behavior. A working with, so when we do things with someone to make life better, or working for, when we do things to make someone's life better, someone else's life better, sorry. These are not like good or bad things. I just want to be clear. This is not a critique of the right way to be a church in your community or be an individual in your community. But as part of Awaken Dane, what we're trying to help you and help the congregational life infuse is a being with kind of behavior and a kind of mindset. That, I think for many, at least I'll just name for myself, like growing up in my church upbringing and the life of the working for was probably the most common approach to the community where we tried to identify a problem or a shortage or something that wasn't going as well as we hoped, and we would come in and try to help support it through like food drives or tutoring in schools or things where we were trying to help those that we perceived as people in need. Would be language that was common in my faith upbringing. I think there's some goodness to that. I think one of the critiques, though, that is important to note too is that creates some power dynamics that can be really unhelpful. And I see nodding heads. So this is not like new research or new insights, I think, but it is something that, especially within, I'll name like the white American church, is something that is so ingrained in the DNA of who our congregations are that it can be hard to think even of the other 3. And so being with Awaken Dane is really trying to create an environment where we're trying to just enjoy the people around us in this very equal footing, and then trying to see where is God at work within that non-power structure sort of way, or where the power structure is as equals. And gosh, it's easy to say. I just want to name that this is really hard to do if the other things are really ingrained in the life of your congregation or in the life of. And I'll say it as someone who like runs an organization where one of our events is called For Dane. And even this process has helped me think like, okay, we should maybe rethink that. So I'll name it, we're in the process of doing that. Not because that's bad, but because I think it sets you up automatically for a certain kind of interaction and power structure that may or may not always be as helpful in achieving the very thing you want to do. So here's what I want to do. Without being critical, but being honest, I want you to, maybe in groups of 2 or 3, we'll make this kind of interactive. You'll do this actually in your team context. I want you with this sticky note to write down some of the ways that your church connects with your community, and maybe just in a couple words, write what is that thing. It's shorthand for you, so you don't have to be super descriptive. And then think about what quadrant it fits into. So we're going to take about 5 to 7 minutes where I want to invite you to as many things as you can. This is obviously not going to be exhaustive. The hope also is not to try to fill the quadrants equally, but just name a bunch of things that your church does as they connect with the community, and then put what quadrant if you can. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these and we're going to start looking at them together. So does that make sense? So name on these one idea per sticky note. What are some ways that your church engages with your community? However you want to think about that. And then I'll invite you to name what quadrant it goes in. How are we doing? Does that make sense? Okay. I wish I had some music or something. I'll hum. Thank you. All right. Scott's already got 6 ideas, so the idea now is to catch up with Scott. So one idea per sticky note, though. That will make this more meaningful when we start putting them up there. All right. I'm going to pause the recording. All right. So again, the hope of this within our congregational team is that it's going to be an opportunity for some self-reflection and self-analysis. Again, not trying to help get the right answer or to feel good or bad about yourself, but trying to have a clear-eyed or a clearer-eyed sense of how do we engage with our neighborhood, with our community, both as individuals. I'm recording. Yep. As individuals or as a community. And I think what we hope that will do in that clear-eyedness will help give greater clarity on, as we invite people into being with kind of activities and experiments, how much dissonance to anticipate. So if that's already a really part of kind of who you are as a congregational team, this will probably feel pretty easy, and that's great. But for most congregations, I think there tends to be some struggles of like, wait, why are we doing this? Or what is this? Or why is that a good idea? And naming some of these things will help set you up for why that might feel uncomfortable or some level of distance. So with that said, this is a judgment-free zone, and it would just be nice to, I'm going to get up and I'm going to try to record it like that. Great. Would anybody be willing to share a few of what they've written down? And again, I'm going to ask you to share it like really briefly so we can get a bunch of these sticky notes up here. Any bold?
A lot of mine started with collecting things. We collect food for the St. Mark's Food Pantry.
And can I just grab?
Yeah. We collect school supplies for Lutheran Relief or for local places. We collect things for the Good Neighbors Personal Essentials Pantry. So it's all like, we don't ever leave our building. We just ask people to bring stuff to there.
Yeah. And Krista, where would you put?
Working for.
Working for.
All of those, I think.
Working for. Thank you. There we go. Yeah.
The one thing I had that I feel like kind of crosses some of those lines is that we are also connected with Madison Area Jail Ministry. So there is some like doing some stuff where we do donate money, but we also are part of their Christmas card writing appeal. So we're writing cards to residents of the jail.
And that one seems like a working with kind of like you have.
Yeah, it feels like it kind of crosses over because it's some working for,
but
also some
there.
Almost some being with
by
sending them a card. Like that's the one that I thought kind of
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I love that you're naming this because I think sometimes these aren't like there isn't a clear delineation, right? Where there is some, it has elements of both. That's helpful to say that. And also, thank you, Kristen, for being brave and going first.
Absolutely.
Would anybody else be willing to share a few? Rich, you have like, can I just? You look prepared.
So the majorities are working for, but there are others there. I don't know whether you can read my scrawl.
Go ahead. Yeah. Whether or not the posted note. But a bunch of them are working for. Is there any that you would name in other categories?
Yeah, there are. So we have walking paths on the property. I'm not sure. And there's, we do electric vehicle sustainability fair that's geared toward the neighborhood. I don't know exactly how to categorize that either.
Mm.
Um,
No, I mean the last one strikes me at first blush as a working for, and that you're offering a benefit to those in the area, whether it's information or I don't know. Do I get an electric vehicle if I show up?
we had a raffle
Oh.
for an electric lawnmower.
I am signing up right now.
And you didn't even have to buy a ticket or anything. You just had to put your
And
name
it
on
sounds
the
like lawnmower is a mode of transportation.
Now you have a community garden. And I think that's an interesting one. That I think that how you structure a community garden can kind of
Right,
dictate.
that one's, and of course, it's not our garden, it's the garden across the road.
Okay, and so are people from your congregation participating in proximity?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would probably say, do you do anything with the food other than do people donate that? Is that something they take
It's
home?
owned by the Madison, I don't have the right name, but the consortium of food pantries, they own that garden.
Yep. Okay, so all the food is donated.
All
I
the
think,
food is
yep,
donated,
yep,
right,
yep,
all the food is, these are not individuals' gardens, this is one community garden.
yep, gotcha. Okay. Here, I'm just gonna. That's great. Get these right here. Anybody else willing to share? I think we have time for a couple more examples.
A couple in other categories. Most of ours are working for, but the Get Acquainted dinner with parents from the Medina School, a Muslim elementary school.
Okay.
Being with.
Awesome.
And support Wisconsin Council of Churches advocacy in the state legislature.
Which is the being for thing, right? Can you named a lot of the other ones are working
Working for.
working for? Can I put those up there? Just I think it helps with the visual too.
So I had like mud spinning or like I had to like exchange like man we're not doing any community engagement, and then I had to like retrain my brain to be like the way that we're pursuing church right now is a whole lot less like an organization and a whole lot more like a people. And then I started thinking about the way that our people are engaging, and I just started writing down like, well, our kids play at the neighborhood park. That's just a being with. We have people who like bring quick birthday presents to neighbors, which is just a being with, or talking with neighbors.
Can you kind of hold that sticky note for me? Yeah. Sorry, keep talking. I don't want
Talking with neighbors about lawns and fences, which is just being with and not fixing anything except weeds. Having kids who want to go to the local wheel park and invite their neighbor friends. Going fishing with a neighbor, having spontaneous drinks, and conversation then in the backyard. Those are all just being with, not accomplishing anything.
That's what we're about.
We have a household who wants to make food and give it away, and so they did it with a church in Portage. I put that as a working for. Pull up the trailer and give food to another congregation. We just rallied together and collected money to help pay for a guy who was moving but couldn't afford storage fees. That's working for. I'm coaching soccer. I'm relating with co-coaches and trying to encourage youth, which kind of straddles that working with and for. And then we got lots of people where it's creating space for vulnerable conversations, which I think is maybe working with.
Thank you. Maybe one last one. Is anybody else willing to share?
My file, I got the biggest file of working for, but I have two that cross thing lines. Our cookouts we're doing for working for, we're also helping create community, create space for the community. Then the people who are participating just take over the community building. So I think those two are working, what is it?
Sounds like a working with and a being with element
Yeah.
are both. Is that a fair? I think that's what I heard. Yeah, no, that's good. And then the other.
These are all working for, we're a food pantry in our free weekly meal, and we have a special terrace recycling program to collect things that can't be recycled in the recycling bin, that stuff.
That's our also you take to the.
There's a whole long list, and not a lot of styrofoam works, but we take it to the first giant Methodist.
So thank you all, first of all, and I wish we had more time to keep, just because this is a fun practice, at least for me. And this is a kind of this is not a surprise. I think this is often, this seems very normal. And what's interesting, actually, is now that we've done this a couple times with different churches, is there's often one or two congregations, because they have a really unique structure that has really heavy load in this space. And if you took them out of it, you'd like really significant focus on this one. So thanks, Shannon, for being the outlier and blowing that up in all the good sort of ways. But no, it's really interesting how there's certain models and structures and ways of gathering and practicing our traditions that lean into these different things. I think the emphasis here, like I said, is not a surprise, and probably means that as we go into these encouragements around being with, that will create some important and needed repetition around why do we do that? That feels weird. Is that okay? Is this really ministry? How are, is this in the Bible? I don't know. Those are the kinds of things that it might trigger for you and your congregational teams. And even just being aware of the strong gravitational pull. So I've witnessed this already where congregations have gone through this. It feels like you just get it, and then you don't really think about it for a couple of months, and you come back and do an experiment, and it goes right back into the doing for paradigm. And I think it's just because it's in our bones if you've been around the church stuff for a long time. Let me just name a little bit of the specific of the take-home activity that's coming up, invite any questions, and then we'll be done with our time. So if you turn over to the next page, it's the take-home activity number 2. And in bold, what you and your congregational team are going to be invited to, if you're year 1 folks, year 1 folks, is to be going into a space where people gather for about an hour, and this can be any number of kinds of spaces, to practice being with. And there's a series of questions that are going to kind of offer prompts as far as like making observations. And I'll say this just because I know, at least in the groups that I was having coached previously, this is hopefully not an invitation to be a weirdo. Like there are some who are like, what am I supposed to do? Like go in the room and like stare at people awkwardly for an hour and leave. This is hopefully like looking for ways that you can be a full participant in that space. And I know people have done things from a local coffee shop to a bar to a local neighborhood picnic or block party. But I think it's ways where where there's interactions. Book clubs is another good example people have tried. I say that hopefully not to tell you what to do, but maybe seed ideas of what that being with in gatherings. For year 2 folk, this idea of moving into that being with on a rhythm of experimentation, hopefully is just a helpful reminder as we start gathering again. And perhaps over the summer, you or your team has, Matt, for reasons that make sense up here, have your framework has moved back into that doing for. So just encourage you to try to think through how do you draw people into this being with kind of practice. Let me just pause there and ask if there's any questions, because sometimes this can be confusing. Or coaches or Jonna, like anything you would add that.
Yeah, can you just comment on how when we do this in October as a full group, personal differences, we're also asking them to think about their personal,
Yes.
not just speaking on how the churches be, but speaking forward.
Yes,
how
yes, yes.
they in their neighborhoods.
Yes.
Right.
So there are a set of questions that are meant to actually, well, either highlight how the perception of church and personal are either they align or they might not. And the hope is that this will offer some clarity. So there will be sets of questions that say like, how does the church, and you'll get something like this, and then it'll go back and go, okay, how do you? And if you see total difference, that's really interesting, I think, right? Like, because I would say they are part of the church. And so like, if they personally have a very different perception than what they think the church is, that would be a great conversation. Yeah. And if there's great alignment, wonderful. But I think at the end of the day, we are trying to encourage the individuals on our teams to engage with their neighborhood of residents and eventually the church as a whole having that as part of like the cultural reality. So as far as like measurable outcomes, that's a little bit of a measurable outcome for those who are. We referenced the PhDs in our group today. John, does that elicit any other? Now is a great time to ask for 2 more minutes.
So this is what the plenary.
The plenary.
The
The large group collection of human beings.
I'm getting my glossary of terms.
Yeah. We all are.
In order. So this is going to be the take-home activity for the congregation at that event.
Yes.
So
You are holding next time's schedule and information packet. Yep. Thank you. Good question.
And that's something like the year 2 folks, I think last year recommending it's helpful for you all to have some time with this before you're trying to then facilitate for your teams, which is why we're taking these training moments in our PLCs how to do that. So
Yep.
And year 2, year 2 and 3, you'll see that you have a different take home. Maybe you have an experiment on 90 to keep you guys focusing on your experimentation.
Yep.
But if you feel like you guys need refreshers, you will.
That's
so
true.
we're actually going to break up at the learning gathering, whatever it's called, into year 1 and year 2. So Lisa and I will be with the year 2 folks and processing this together and then there's a meeting. So
Yep. We'll eat together and then we'll break up.
Well together.
Yes, gosh. Okay, the schedule's here. Just read the schedule. All right. I want to respect your time. Is there any other questions? And feel free to stick around after if you'd like. Any other questions or comments?
I think this is brilliant, giving this to us 2 weeks in advance and just having a sneak peek so that leaders aren't.
say that one more time. No,
And just to take an extra breath before leaders have to lead, to first be like, get their eyes open to what's coming.
Good.
I've not ever really seen that before, and I think it's fantastic.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. And this is really a reflection of others before you who have offered that kind of feedback. So, way to go, others. All right. If you want to talk to your coach or have any other specific check-ins or anything administratively with Jana, she knows all things for Awaken Day. I will downsize the expectations and a lot of other stuff. So, anything else before we roll? Great. Christina, could you send us with like just a blessing word? I'm putting you on the spot, but would you be willing to do that? Okay.